Now we're going to hear firsthand from our students about their needs, the opportunities they face, the barriers they've pushed through to pursue their pathways to, through, and beyond college. And most importantly, what actions we can take to help millions more students learn all they can to complete their certificates and degrees for success in their chosen careers, communities, and states. I'm now proud to introduce the moderator of our student panel. Hailing from the San Francisco Bay Area, Alex Chebanow is an award-winning filmmaker, producer, writer, and photojournalist. He transferred from Foothill Community College and graduated from the University of Southern California. Alex began his career making documentaries to raise public awareness about the effects of inequities and inequalities on American youth and families. In his films, Alex has chronicled the impacts of music therapy for children with autism, college mentorship, and fitness programs for people with physical disabilities. And after many years in the making, in 2017, with executive producer Dan Rather, Alex premiered his first major documentary, Fail State, a film about the student loan crisis, capturing the diverse and troubling experiences of students burdened with insurmountable student debt who attended for-profit colleges. For his investigative work on Fail State, Alex was awarded the 2019 William Randolph Hearst Award for Outstanding Investigative Reporting. He's already begun work on a new film as he continues to strengthen student protections and raise student voices, which is what this panel is about. Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Martha. I really appreciate that. I guess a quick note, I've been working with Martha for many years, and I guess it's been a dream of mine to be working so close with her. And she was actually one of, I believe it was my former chancellor of Foothill De Anza Community College. This is right before she went to the Obama administration. So yeah, thank you, Martha, for that introduction. I guess since we have a little bit, we're limited by time, I'm gonna try to go quick with my introduction. So, you know, I'm a filmmaker, but I also consider myself a student advocate. So as a student advocate, my work focuses entirely on elevating student voices. And I came to this conclusion or just this opinion because I understood that behind every single dollar of student loan debt in this country, there's a person with friends, family, and dreams. And, you know, that's why I'm so honored to be the moderator on this panel with such courageous, smart, and inspiring voices. I mean, I think these students and former students, and then it's just students everywhere, always need to be a part of the conversation. So let's just begin quickly. Let's start with introducing these panelists. Martin, could you start with an introduction on yourself?
Hi there, my name is Martin Hernandez. I am a student with Alamo Community Colleges at St. Philip's in San Antonio, Texas. And I returned to college 20 years after I initially graduated from high school. And I'm a musician.
Thank you, Martin. Tamari, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Tamari Ray. I'm 20 years old. I am a recent graduate at Mississippi State. I'm transferring to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. And I guess my role here is to speak on the student support that's needed to keep students in college with, you know, promise programs and things of that nature.
Emily?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Tarkanish, and I am finishing up my last year in a PhD program at the University of Connecticut. I also identify as a student with a disability. I experienced a severe traumatic brain injury right before I came to college, and my current research involves students with disabilities. So hopefully I can share today some of my experiences as well as reflect on some bigger systemic issues students all over are experiencing.
Waukesha?
Hello, everyone. My name is Waukesha Wilkerson, and I am in my last semester at Sacramento State University, earning a bachelor's degree in psychology. I am a single mom of 3 children, and I'm here on behalf of student parents across the country.
Thank you. Angelique?
Hi, everybody. My name is Angelique Salzan, and I'm representing foster youth in and aged out of the foster care system. I went to Binghamton University and got my bachelor's in psychology and recently graduated with my master's in policy management from Georgetown
Great.
University. Excuse me.
Thanks, Angelique. Okay, let's start with my questions then. Martin, I'm going to start with you. You decided to go to college later in life, and you're a voice for so many students who made the same decision to go while having a full-time job and a family. What has that been like for you?
It does pose some challenges, especially when you're coming back into the education system after such a bit of a delay, if you will. It seems that when you have some of the entrance exams and some of the exams you have to take to kind of get a baseline of where you are, even though you fall right within the spectrum of right there, right on the cusp. And if your target goal is like you got to score 75 and you hit a 74, you actually have to go backwards. So there are some challenges that you do face, especially trying to remember everything after, in my case, 20 years. In addition to the whole juggling the balance of being a student, being a parent, being a full-time worker, things like that. All of that does come into play, and it does have a bit of an impact. It makes it substantially more difficult to do.
And just a quick follow-up, Martin, has there been points where it's been scary for you going through college?
Absolutely. College requires a certain level of dedication and perseverance. You have to be willing to allocate time out of your life. And for me directly, I can tell you that it impacts, me being a college student has a direct and profound impact on my child and my wife, because if I'm not working, I'm in class, that's time away from them. And it does have an impact on them, which in turn has an impact on the family dynamic, which can impact me, because now that's more stress. Well, I'm not allocating enough time to my son. I'm not spending enough time with my family. And that kind of eats at your mind, in addition to making sure you go to work, making sure that you're doing all your homework and whatnot. So yes, it's a challenge. It is a challenge.
Thanks, Martin. Emily, my question is for you now. In speaking with you before this panel, you said something to me that I think, embodies one of the major shortcomings in our current student support system. I mean, quoting you, you said, "No one told me about disability services in college." Your own perspective here is so important. And to ask you a question that might be hard to answer emotionally, but it'd be really important to share. I mean, can you take us to a moment in college where you really struggled as a person with a disability?
Absolutely. So like I said, I endured a severe traumatic brain injury in high school, which affected my cognition, like my memory, my processing speed, my sustained attention, a lot of my cognitive functions. So I got to college and I would take classes that didn't require processing speed or short-term memory, like English classes and history classes. I would go home, I would take longer to do my work, but I would get good grades, A's and B's, great. And then I would put in the same amount of effort, if not even more, in a class like math or science where it was tests, timed tests. And I never finished a single one. It was so challenging for me. And I felt so frustrated because I worked my tail off to be a good student, but there was this discrepancy and I didn't know why. I honestly didn't even realize it was necessarily related to my disability because again, I was doing well in my other classes. And in my 4 years in college, not one person said, "Hey, have you heard of disability services?" Even though I was very vocal about having a traumatic brain injury. So I think people knew that I had, a disability, but for whatever reason, those services just weren't advertised. And I felt really alone, because I didn't tell anyone why I was doing so poorly in certain classes and so well in the others. And I definitely felt alone. And I felt unsupported in a sense. And I think that really impacted, my passion. Once I did find out about disability services and, my master's program, I was really angry that nobody told me about it, because my grades sure would have looked a lot differently. And I also really wish that there was community to talk about it, because it was an evolution in finding, myself as a person with a disability who was an academic and who could complete college and everything. So I really think it would have been a lot easier for me if I knew about services as well as knew about other students who use services, because it was frustrating as well as lonely not knowing about either.
Thanks, Emily. Angelique, as a person who grew up as a foster youth, can you take us through your journey going to college? What was it like?
Yeah, so my experience may not be the same for every foster youth. They have a different experience when they enter the academic space. So I want to say that at the outset. I had some support from my biological family, but in terms of the process, it was very much on me as a student to make sure the paperwork was in, to make sure everything was filled out, and pretty much being my support system as I went through undergrad. However, I had some support services. I got some scholarships, and there were resources provided to me that helped me and put a cushion under me and a safety net, really, to help me through. A lot of adults who supported me in my foster care agency, communicated with the institution in terms of tuition payments. There were some cases where my colleagues in foster care who had their classes dropped and weren't able to continue on. And I really got support from those folks to ease the burden of responsibility to me as a student, fresh out of high school and going into undergrad. So while it was difficult and it was stressful, there were certain supports in place to help me really figure it out and really make sure that I had everything in place so that the stress levels could stay low and I could focus mainly on my academics.
Thanks. Tamari, when we spoke, you said something to me that really stood out, and it was also just inspiring to me. You said, I want to be an advocate for students like me. And so my question based on that is, what led you to wanting to be that voice?
Well, in high school and a lot of, throughout my life, my childhood, I've never really felt as if I had a voice. I was always shy. I didn't feel like people would ever listen to me until more, recently I've started to push that is like, and I've had a lot of support, like a lot of teachers in high school, one specific teacher, but I'm not going to get into that. But he really let me know that you can make a difference. You have a voice, you're very optimistic. You have a strong voice. You're very passionate in what you believe in and what you speak about. So using that and trying to help people, because that's always been my thing, is I've always wanted to just be the person that people can rely on for help and advice and things of that nature. So me advocating for people like me is kind of like, I feel like that's my calling. I feel like that's what I like to do. I like to help people and let them know about things that they probably didn't know about. Sort of like how Emily was saying, she wants to let people know that, there are disability services, just as I want to let people know that, you can go to college, even if you didn't have the financial means of going to college, you can, there's promise programs and scholarships and all kinds of things. So, that's kind of why I want to be an advocate for people like me.
To do one more follow-up, Tamari, go back into what we were talking about. You said something also that was just really important, and I had a very similar experience in community college with that. But you mentioned how friends and people you knew had to drop out of community college. Was that the main contributing factor to becoming this voice, or was there something else?
I feel like that was a lot of was a big contributing factor, because when you're in college and your friends leave and you're kind of lonely, you feel kind of stuck, like they're talking about other things while you're talking about, oh, I have this 10-page research paper that's due, so and so and that, So I think that a lot of Promise programs and a lot of colleges in general should have more or bigger support systems for students. I know, for instance, at Pellissippi and like with Tennessee Promise, we have a program that's kind of attached to Tennessee Promise. It's called Tennessee Achieves, where you have your own mentor. They check in with you. They, offer you services. They offer you scholarships. Not offer you, but let you know about these kind of things. And I feel like a lot of my friends didn't take that and utilize it when it was really helpful for me, especially because I wouldn't have been where I am today without my mentor. So I feel like me letting my friends or me not letting them know, like, hey, use this person, use this, and that, kind of pushed them away, or not pushed them away, but they didn't have the motivation to keep going into college, and they felt as if they didn't have support and all this, and that. So I guess I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Tamari. Thank you. I guess, Waukesha, you are a parent of 3, and you told me you had so many false starts going to college, but this time you are succeeding. I mean, why is it different?
Thanks, Alex. I think what is important to highlight for post-traditional students like myself who are student parents is that we do have a lot of false starts because we're not aware, similar to what Emily and Tamari were mentioning, of resources that are available specifically for our identity. So I was able to locate resources such as Project Self-Sufficiency in Orange County, California, that provides wraparound services to single parents that are attending college. And with those services, they led me to additional supports that were available to parenting students, such as referrals to scholarship opportunities, food pantry support services, rental assistance support services, childcare support services, things that I didn't necessarily qualify because of a lot of those resources that are provided by the government or state are really income-based. But I was a working student parent, which kind of put me in the middle where I made too much to qualify for services, but not enough to really have enough to support myself and my family while I pursued higher education. I think that once this last time when I attended college, that was the unique factor that made me more successful, is because I finally had a support system. But similar to Emily, had I known about these services 3 years, 4 years, 5 years ago, during one of those many false starts at college, I feel like I could have, been more successful sooner.
Thanks, Waukesha. Angelique, I think to slightly modify the question I wrote, because I loved what you said earlier, but in our discussion, I think last week, you said something along the lines of that your story or your experience through college is basically unique, or that for every success of foster youth through college, there are a lot of people who don't make it through college. Can you talk about that and how the system needs to change to get more foster youth through college?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the question, Alex. I think it's really assessing what the needs are of that particular student when it comes to, the adults and folks at the agency who are involved with that youth, if they do still have a connection to their agency, hopefully that they do. But I think it's really catering to that specific student and providing resources within that agency to see through their success. I think the field is doing a better job at cultivating more space for foster youth to continue services within the agency and get more support, but there definitely needs to be an emphasis on education, because as we all know, education leads to self-sufficiency in some form or fashion, and foster youth really need that, because a lot of them don't have positive outcomes, or they do go to school and don't make it through to get the degree, or they don't know that their resources are there. So they're taking out loans and then they're not finishing. And so then you have this conundrum of students from CARE not really finishing their degrees and then being stacked with debt and then not being able to go on and have a successful career life. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to focus on what students need, whether it's mental health, whether it's housing, whether it's health related, to really make sure that the environment is right for academic success.
Thanks, Angelique. I guess, Emily, very similar question. What needs to be done to support students like you?
Well, the short answer is a lot. A lot of things need to change. But I think two of the biggest ways that I think improvements can happen is, one, schools need to have awareness campaigns. I'm going to talk in a Spark Talk later today, and I'm going to tell everybody that at least 20% of undergraduates experience and self-disclose a disability. But more than likely, there's a lot more of us out there who, again, just aren't disclosing because of stigma, because of lack of awareness, fear. Every college needs to have loud and proud disability advocates. In addition, I think when we look at diversity offices, which are blowing up and doing awesome work on our campuses, but they don't always highlight disability, you know? I mean, lots of my friends, you know, work with the LGBTQ Center or the Center for Students of Color, or even there's a First Gen Club, but there wasn't necessarily a disability club. We recently started one at UConn, but before that, there wasn't one. And I think it's part of, again, lack of awareness, but that lack of awareness sends a big, loud message. It says, your disability, keep it behind closed doors. It's not part of diversity. And that's a problem. So I really think we need to spread awareness, and those campaigns cost money. So we definitely need, you know, national funding for national disability awareness programs. But then I think also supporting students with disabilities financially, because having a disability, it's not cheap. I mean, everybody experiences the hardships of paying for college, but whether it be having a disability and having to pay for doctor's appointments or medicine or therapy or tutoring or extra supports you need, that's on the student. Even getting documentation of your disability, which you need to have to get disability services, that's not free. In fact, it cost me thousands of dollars, and I didn't know where to get that money at first. So I really think through awareness campaigns, as well as systematically creating funds to support the needs of students with disabilities, I think those are two great places to start.
Thanks, Emily. Waukesha, speaking for student parents like yourself, and generally for all students who need specific types of support to succeed, how can we actually lessen the burden on students to get that assistance?
That's so funny you asked. I was just typing a response to one of the questions from Brandy about some of the actions that staff can take daily on college campuses. One of the things that I think it's really important to a way to get resources to student parents specifically is identifying them as a community. I had no idea that there was a term for people like me that were parents who were returning back to college. Had I known sooner, then I would have been able to navigate through resources from people who were experiencing the same challenges as myself, which Project Self-Sufficiency gave me that. I was able to meet a local community of, actually, I live in an apartment complex, and maybe half of the occupants of the apartments were also students. So immediately upon receiving those services, I was connected to my neighbors who I otherwise would not have had any interactions with outside of, you know, being college students. Another thing that I think it's important on college campus communities to get resources to student parents is, after identifying them, is to destigmatize some. So one of the resources that I used, and it was, and I received a lot of second looks because I would use the food pantry on my campus, especially when the onset of COVID. Prior to COVID, maybe I hadn't been made aware of the food pantry. I didn't see myself as someone who in need of the assistance of the food pantry. But utilizing that resource, I realized there was so much nutrition, so many nutritional things there that were just free. And it really helped with my expenses at home, being able to have access to that. So one of the initiatives, because I also work with my community college that I graduated from, is rebranding the food pantry. if maybe instead of a food pantry is nutritional services, because a lot of people don't see themselves as people who need a food pantry per se. I think language is really, really important when you're trying to connect with students. And no one, we don't want to feel like charity cases. And that was the difference this time with starting college, is that the organizations that I partner with, such as Project Self-Sufficiency, Ascend at the Aspen Institute, they treated me as an equal, as a colleague, as a partner in my success, and not as someone that they were donating services to.
And Waukesha, I'm trying to figure out a question to really prompt what you said the other day that I just loved and told you I wanted to steal. But yeah, like this idea of how all these programs, students need to dig into it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so that was part of my answer too. It's like a solution to some of the issues that we have with getting resources and services to students is the way we look at it, because we expect students to go and find these services and then sign up for them, when it should be the other way around, because essentially we're entitled to them. So if you can identify students at admissions as someone who, for example, for Emily, who needs disabled student services, maybe there's a checkbox where she wants to share that information, then she's automatically enrolled. So there's an opt-out option as opposed to an opt-in. And that way you capture many more students who need the service, who maybe don't even know that they exist.
Thanks, Waukesha. You did it. That's what I wanted. How much time do we? I have one last question for Martin, but do we have time to answer some of these audience questions? Are there? I know there were some long ones, and some have been answered already. Okay, so we should wrap. I guess, Martin, for you to finish off this panel,
Yes, sir.
For students that come from all walks of life, you, Waukesha, Tamari, Emily, Angelique, the whole gamut of different people who go and aspire to get a college degree. For everyone listening here today, like the participants that are attending the symposium, what do they need to know as they look to better increase the support that we give to students?
I think, and we're starting to see the steps in the right direction, but I think that the words and the mentality of this is the way things have always been kind of needs to change. A bunch of things that we see and that I see as a student now, I'm seeing progress made in some of the clubs that were being discussed earlier and things of that nature. But as I had mentioned in a couple of responses to the questions that I put, and it's just that regardless of what's going on, some of the mindset and the mentality is still, well, that's just the overall college experience, deal with it. That mentality has to change in order to be have the students more successful and have the universities and colleges thrive. Some of that old mentality and that old set in stone mindset of, well, things will never change, really needs to be looked at. And just as everything else around us is evolving, technology, society, communication, everything, we need to take a look at that. And that needs to evolve with the times as well. It needs to catch up. And like I said, we're seeing progress. I think we just need to see more progress and at a steadier rate.
All right, thank you, Martin. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, everyone, for listening in and hearing these voices. I hope this is one of the successful symposium that we can do to just help millions of more students in this country. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, College Promise. Thank you, ETS. This has been such a pleasure and an honor.
I want to thank Tamari, Emily, Waukesha, Angelique, Martin, and Alex.